So, guys, I want to review the South Park episode Cartman Silly 8 Hate Crime 2000. And to me, this is actually one of my favorite episodes of South Park. I think, honestly, when I watch this episode, I really, really enjoy it because, it definitely has two things. It has this social satire, but it's also, so early on in South Park, you see a lot of great character development. And definitely we kind of see a lot of the South Park characters. So definitely, just as it's important to talk about the social satire, it's also very important to talk about the characters and how this sets up a lot of things for the South Park characters. So what happens is that the kids, all the male kids are doing sledding at Mount Phil Collins, and the reason why they do that is because in 1999, Phil Collins, "You'll Be in My Heart" won over Blame Canada at the Academy Awards, and a lot of people were kind of saying how, you look at the Blame Canada song, there's a lot of satire and deep messages, and obviously, Hollywood's not going to give the Oscar to the South Park movie. They're going to give it to Phil Collins because of Oscar politics. Give it to the Disney movie. Don't give it to the Cutting Edge movie. So definitely Trey Parker and Matt Stone were just being funny with their pettiness and just made Mount Phil Collins just to kind of hit him, and then also just to rib him, and then also that when the girls approach them, you kind of see two things that happen. You kind of see the boys bullying Cartman for being fat, and that goes throughout the episode, like a consistent theme of bullying. And then also the girls make a bunch of homophobic insults to the boys, but also they kind of and some of their insults are almost making them feel are calling them submissive in a way, like saying donut puncher, pillow biters, as if somebody's being fucked and they're taking it, they're the doggy in the doggy style type of thing, so I think what Trey and Matt are trying to do is definitely they're trying to do gags where a character will say something that's homophobic or whatever and kind of repeat that through the episode. So I do think that, for all they say about trying to not be like Family Guy, they do have gags, or they have certain things that are repeated a bunch of times. So I do think that it shows their own hypocrisy, but I also think that it kind of sets up a bunch of things. You kind of see how Eric Cartman is really treated, maybe by the boys off camera, where maybe he gets bullied a lot for being fat. And then also the next thing that happens is that there's also a theme about bullying and homophobia and fat and race and other things like that. The kids are so kind of used to calling each other slurs or homophobic slurs or talking about people's sexuality. That was normal in the 90s. So that almost sets up a culture, or fat shaming. There sets up a culture of possibly kids growing up to be very hateful people. And I think maybe what Trey and Matt are trying to say is that the way to solve all these issues with race and division is to start when kids are young. That's really where these problems start. Instead of just trying to pass federal hate crime laws, because you kind of look at South Park in the future. Cartman's still the fat poor kid, and definitely you look at any of the newer episodes of South Park. A lot of you look at Randy's character. A lot of the parental characters, or when they're a little bit older, they're still kind of just calling each other very hurtful words and whatever. So sometimes, you got to start young instead of just passing so many laws. So what happens is that Cartman gets called fat too many times. He throws a rock at Token, and he gets 2 weeks detention in school. And then some federal prosecutors come in and they say that because Token is black, and Cartman's white, it automatically becomes a hate crime. So you kind of see how things get blown out of proportion. That doesn't need that type of consequence where it becomes a federal crime. But that's also true when we look at crimes, how things get blown out of proportion. It's just like I think like somebody was like talking about like how I remember like watching a video about like a substitute teacher, and he said like how there was this there was there were two girls, and one girl was caught cheating, and she was white, and then they kind of didn't make a big deal, but the other person, she was black, and they made a big deal, and she actually got expelled. So you do see that in the school system, but also you see that in the court system. You know, if a black guy commits a crime, you know, he usually gets more time. But also we kind of see that with you almost kind of see this with like charges like you know, let's like look at rape. You know, if you get charged with rape, you can serve multiple years in prison. But if you falsify a rape charge, that could be a misdemeanor, or most times they may say like, oh, there's a status quo. I mean, there's a not status quo, but there's a statute of limitation type of thing. And usually, when you look at the genders that are most associated with these charges, you know, men are most associated with rape, and women are most associated with rape lying, because usually many women come forward about that, and there's a lot that don't. I mean, there's many women. When you think of a rape liar, I think the stereotypical image you have is a woman. That's what I meant to say. And when you think of a rapist, the stereotypical image most people have is a man. But we also know that when it comes to a man being charged for rape, they get a bunch of time. But if a woman is charged for lying about being raped, two things happen. They can either be it could be seen as a misdemeanor. It could be seen as a suspended sentence. There could be a lot of understanding that maybe they went through something in their life, or there could be statute of limitation. Like some people say that, you know, if somebody served 10 years for rape and somebody lied about it, they should serve 10 years as well. But there's double standards based on gender. There's also double standards based on race as well, really. So definitely, I think that just blowing out of proportion, it kind of really alludes to those things. That, you know, obviously because Cartman's white, that he's gonna face more time, and then also that's a very neoliberal agenda. Like now you kind of see how, as I said, like nowadays, government can pick up who they want to trump up charges on because of race and social economic, but also agendas, or be like, okay, well, we want Cartman to serve time because we want him to pay the price, so we look like we're for black people when the government's not is only for itself, really. And then they kind of do like then after Cartman gets when Cartman's in court, he refers to Token as black, and then the prosecutor's kind of saying black. He's actually African American, so that's kind of like true with how sometimes people call somebody like I'm biracial or multiracial. People call me black. I may be irritated, but I correct people politely. But you can't assume somebody's a racist because you refer to them as black or whatever, or terms that kind of been around for a long time. You know, obviously, I've met some old people who refer to Asians as Orientals. So, you know, it doesn't mean that they're racist. It means that that's what they kind of grew up with. So it's kind of like really just putting Cartman in the worst light possible to get their way. And then the other thing that happens is Cartman is poor and he's white, so obviously he's not going to have the same type of protection. If it was Kyle, Kyle comes from more wealth, and he's also Jewish, you know, the Holocaust, that sympathy like a lot of people have for the Jews, especially neoliberals. And then also that his dad's educated and he comes from money. So maybe one of the reasons why Cartman's targeted is because of social economic. You know, he's poor. He has a single mother. There's always stereotypes around single mothers having unruly children, not being able to rule their boys. So they're almost stereotyping Cartman as a racist, and they're also possibly taking advantage of him because they know that he comes from a bad background, and then he also fits a certain stigma. A white kid from Colorado, a lot of people will consider Colorado a southern state because it borders, I believe, like Arizona and New Mexico. And then also, or the country bumpkin stereotype. And then they also kind of maybe put it on him because he also has a single mother. and goes with that stereotype that single mothers don't know how to raise their boys, don't know how to kind of keep the boys in line. So he kind of fits a certain stigma that they're exploiting. And then they have like the famous car chase with the go-go action Bronco. And I really like this. This is kind of one of the reasons why this episode's really, really funny. And then, you kind of see the girls through the episode, like, again, make comments like donut punchers, rump rangers, pillow biters, poop stabbers, a lot of other homophobic, referring to gay sex and homophobic slurs to them. So, like I said, it goes to the theme of, how it's not about laws. It's more about making kids kind of understand as they grow up to not look at people as inferior, understand the power of words, that we shouldn't, like, say call people like faggot or retard or bitch or other things that are words that are, like, as they say, like words that are offensive towards a certain group of person, and then also promote stereotypes, so so yeah, that's important. And then, like, when Cartman goes to jail, he meets Romper Stomper, and really the whole storyline with him and Romper Stomper is how Romper Stomper doesn't feel like he has any friends, and he has trust versus mistrust issues. And then he and Cartman become friends. But then also you kind of see what Cartman is. That I think behind that angry kid is that he's somebody who is like, who's 8. He wants his mom. He really loves his mom. His mom really is his, like, comfort blanket and whatever, like, is his comfort zone. So I think that, it's good to show him as vulnerable, but also just to understand that behind that terrible person that Cartman is that he's still like a kid with that's 8 years old with the brain of an 8-year-old that still needs his mom, can't really figure out the world, and is overwhelmed by life. So it's understandable that he would break down. And also, with the jail system, they really don't do a lot, really. They kind of, like, do the stereotypical things you see in jail. Like, you see the gay kid in jail. You also see people joke about dropping soap. You see, like, the beating and whatever. So I think this is where Matt and Trey kind of fail a little bit in the episode. But obviously they have, like, 20 minutes to create an episode. They could have done a little bit more showing what juvenile halls look like, or even talk about a quota or other things like that, really. So I think they could have done more with this, to talk about maybe that, maybe the other reason is because, the states make money for every kid they send to jail. So they could have done a little bit more, but definitely you see Cartman get out of jail at the end of the episode. But before that happens, Token, Stan and Kyle go visit Token's dad and Token, and they talk about, like, the hate crime thing. And I like what Token's father said, is that the governor won't listen to him because he's black. And I think it kind of refers to a couple of things, that people still have prejudice, but there's also African Americans who feel like they want to make a difference in the world, but they won't be listened to because of their race, or they know from past experiences that people won't listen to them. But also, too, in government, sometimes government officials still have old school racism, or that idea where there are hate crime laws and there's other laws on the books, but it's not passed by black people. It's passed by a lot of the senators who are usually white. So it's almost like what we see with pandering, where it's mostly white people and Jewish producers presenting people of color. And that's also true when you look at laws. It's mostly because most politicians are old white men. And they're kind of like saying, okay, maybe this is helping black causes, or I know the black struggle and other things like that. So they're kind of passing laws, but instead of just overcoming their own prejudice, and then also kind of the other thing within that is maybe still having old racism. They're for racism. They're for racism and against racism at the same time. The next thing that I will say is that he also educates the boys on hate crime hypocrisy. So it kind of goes down to that message too of, he probably knows that they have a chance because, Stan is white, Kyle is white and Jewish, and Token is with Token who's black's with 2 white guys. So there's always, so maybe kind of like it's okay with them presenting it to the governor, because obviously when you have white people in the group, or white people taking charge in the group, it's more than likely your point's going to be listened to if it's just a black person. So so that's definitely really, really true. And then I think that the other thing is the hate crime hypocrisy. Like, definitely they talked about like how creating laws creates a lot more division in this country, because it's saying that okay, because if a white person gets more time hurting a black person, that means black people are superior. Or the other thing too, if a man beats a woman, you may get more time for that. But if a woman beats a man, you get that may be less time. Or you look at child abuse. Like if a woman sexually assaults a minor, like they say in the other episode, nice, nice, nice. But if it's a male teacher sexually assaulting a female student, it's like, oh, we need to talk about the death penalty or something like that. So definitely when you pass laws for hate crimes, it kind of perpetuates the cycle of differences. People are superior by their differences. And then also, like as they said, that if somebody beats a man if two men are fighting because one man cheated on his wife, if the wife cheated on her husband with a guy, and the husband beats up that guy up, really, isn't that a hate crime because you hate the person for doing that? Or if you do something like you spray tag a government building with graffiti, or throw a rock through a government building, isn't that like a hate crime because you hate the government? But you don't get the same type of hate crime or anti-terrorism law charges. So it's definitely hypocrisy. But I think the way for everybody to be treated fairly in this country is to remove division, and division should be removed in laws. In addition to my philosophy in media as well, and also starting the kids when they're young to understand like how to insult people or not insult people. Like, I'll call somebody a jackass is better than calling somebody a fag, type of thing, really. I know. So definitely this episode has a lot of talking points. It's a very cerebral episode, and one of the best episodes of early South Park.